The violet sun of Nova Proxima cast strange shadows through the crystalline trees as James Harrison adjusted his atmospheric filter. The 15-year-old colonist checked his wrist display, making sure he hadn't wandered too far from the settlement's safety perimeter. The alien forest stretched before him, its transparent vegetation refracting light in ways that still amazed him even after 3 years on humanity's first extrasolar colony. James pulled his sample collector from his backpack, carefully gathering specimens of the local flora for his personal research. Unlike the other teenagers in the colony who spent their free time in the virtual reality pods, James preferred the real mysteries of this alien world. His mother, the colony's lead botanist, had always encouraged his scientific curiosity, even if his father worried about the dangers lurking in Nova Proxima's wilderness. The sound came without warning, a crystalline chime that seemed to vibrate through the very air itself. James froze, his heart pounding as he scanned the surrounding forest. The settlement's security briefings had documented hundreds of native species, but nothing that made a sound like this. It came again, higher pitched this time, almost like a cry of pain. Following the sound, James pushed through a cluster of crystal-leafed bushes and stopped dead in his tracks. Before him lay a creature unlike anything in the colony's biological database. It resembled a serpent, but its body appeared to be made of living crystal, transparent in some places and opaque in others, with what looked like streams of light flowing beneath its surface. The creature was clearly in distress, its body coiled tightly around itself. As James watched, he noticed a dark mass within its crystalline form, something that seemed to pulse with an angry red light. The serpent's eyes, geometric patterns of light that shifted and changed, fixed on James with an intelligence that made him catch his breath. "You're hurt," James whispered, slowly kneeling beside the creature. Every safety protocol he'd ever learned screamed at him to retreat, to call colony security, to do anything but approach an unknown alien life form. But something in those eyes held him there, a consciousness, a plea for help that transcended species. The serpent uncoiled slightly, revealing more of the dark mass within its body. James pulled out his scanner, carefully analyzing the readings. The device showed that the foreign object was some kind of crystal, but unlike the biological crystals that made up the creature's body, this one was generating energy patterns that seemed to be causing the being pain. "That doesn't belong inside you, does it?" James spoke softly, more to himself than the creature. To his surprise, the serpent moved its head in what appeared to be a negative gesture. James blinked, wondering if he was imagining things. "Can you understand me?" The serpent's light patterns shifted, creating complex geometric shapes that seemed to pulse in rhythm. James felt a strange sensation in his mind, not quite words but definitely a form of communication. The message was clear: help. Pushing aside his fear, James reached into his pack for his medical kit. He might not know anything about this creature's biology, but he knew basic first aid. The scanner showed that the crystal was lodged in what appeared to be a vital organ, but there was a natural opening nearby, perhaps the creature's equivalent of a mouth. "I'm going to try to help you," James said, slowly reaching toward the serpent. "Please don't. Well, please don't kill me." The creature remained still, its eyes fixed on James with an intensity that made him shiver. As his hands touched its crystalline surface, he was surprised to find it warm, almost humming with energy. Working carefully, James used a small probe from his medical kit to gently manipulate the foreign crystal. The serpent trembled but remained still, trusting him completely. After several tense minutes, the crystal shifted and began to move toward the opening. With one final gentle push, it fell free, landing in James's palm. The crystal was hot to the touch, its surface covered in strange markings that seemed to shift and change as he watched. The serpent's body immediately relaxed, its internal lights brightening and flowing more smoothly. It raised its head to look at James, and this time the mental sensation was stronger: gratitude, relief, and something else: urgency. Before James could react, The serpent's eyes began to glow with increasing intensity. The crystal in his hand grew warmer, and suddenly his mind was filled with images. Vast crystalline cities floating in space, beings like the serpent but much larger, and a darkness spreading between the stars. The vision was gone as quickly as it came, leaving James gasping. The serpent moved closer, its head now level with James. Its eyes pulsed with patterns he somehow understood. Danger coming. Need help. Trust you. James looked down at the crystal in his hand, then back at the creature. He realized with growing certainty that he had stumbled onto something far bigger than a simple rescue. A distant alarm echoed through the forest. The settlement's evening curfew warning. James knew he should head back, but the weight of what had just happened held him in place. The serpent's gaze remained fixed on him, waiting. In that moment, James made a decision that would change not only his life, but potentially the future of two species. "I'll help you," he said firmly, standing up. "But we need to be careful. The colony, they might not understand." The serpent's lights pulsed in agreement. As James began to plan how to hide and protect this extraordinary being, he couldn't help but smile at the irony. He'd always dreamed of making first contact with an alien intelligence, but he never imagined it would happen quite like this. As the violet sun began to set, casting rainbow refractions through the crystalline forest, James Harrison, the 15-year-old son of colonists, took the first steps on a path that would lead him into an adventure beyond his wildest dreams. With an alien crystal in his pocket and a crystalline serpent as his new ally, he headed back toward the settlement, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. The ventilation system in James's personal quarters hummed softly as he examined the alien crystal under his desk lamp. 3 days had passed since his encounter with the crystalline serpent, whom he'd started calling Prism in his mind, and he'd spent every free moment studying both the crystal and the strange visions it had shared. The crystal sat on a cushioned surface, its faceted edges catching the light in impossible ways. Sometimes, when James looked at it from certain angles, he could swear he saw movements within its structure, like ancient memories trying to surface. He'd managed to keep it hidden from his parents and the colony's security sensors by storing it in a lead-line sample case he'd borrowed from his mother's lab. A soft chime from his wrist display warned him of approaching footsteps. James quickly sealed the crystal in its case and slid it under his bed just as his door opened. His father stood in the doorway, still wearing his security chief uniform. "You missed dinner again," Thomas Harrison said, his expression a mixture of concern and suspicion. "Your mother says you've been distracted lately. Everything all right?" James forced a casual shrug. "Just working on a research project. You know how I get with my studies." His father's eyes narrowed slightly. "The sensors picked up some unusual energy signatures in Sector 7 a few days ago. You weren't out collecting samples in that area, were you?" "Sector 7. James kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered in his chest. "That's outside the safe zone. You know I always stay within bounds, Dad." Thomas seemed to accept this, though not entirely convinced. "Just be careful, James. We're getting strange readings all over the colony lately. The council is concerned." After his father left, James waited until the footsteps faded before pulling out his tablet. He'd been documenting everything he could remember from the visions Prism had shared. The crystalline cities he'd seen weren't just beautiful. They were technological marvels, suggesting a civilization far more advanced than humanity's. A flash of movement outside his window caught his attention. James's quarters were on the colony's 3rd level, overlooking the boundary between the settlement and the crystal forest. There, partially concealed by the transparent vegetation, Prism's form shimmered in the moonlight. The creature had been keeping watch, appearing each night as if checking on both James and the crystal. James grabbed his jacket and the crystal's container. He needed answers, and he knew he wouldn't get them sitting in his room. Checking that his father had truly gone, he slipped out through his window and down the maintenance ladder he'd discovered years ago during his exploratory phase. The night air of Nova Proxima carried a slight electric charge, making his hair stand on end as he approached Prism's location. The crystalline serpent emerged fully from the vegetation, its internal lights pulsing with what James now recognized as greeting patterns. "I need to understand," James whispered, removing the crystal from its container. "What are you trying to tell me? What's coming?" Prism's eyes began to glow, and this time James was prepared for the mental connection. Images flooded his mind, but clearer now, more focused. He saw vast ships made of living crystal, carrying Prism's people across the stars. They were guardians, he realized, protectors of life throughout the galaxy. The crystal he held was part of a vast network, a warning system that had detected something approaching, something that devoured worlds. The vision shifted, showing him darkness moving between stars, leaving dead worlds in its wake. Not a natural phenomenon, but something engineered, a weapon that had broken free of its creator's control, and it was heading toward Nova Proxima. James gasped as the connection broke, his mind reeling from the implications. "How long?" he asked, his voice trembling. "How long until it reaches us?" Prism's light patterns formed complex geometries that somehow translated into understanding in James's mind. 3 standard months, less than a season on this alien world. "I have to warn them," James said, starting to turn back toward the colony. But Prism's tail whipped out, blocking his path. The creature's eyes pulsed urgently, sharing another vision. One of panic, of humans reacting with fear and violence, of weapons turned against crystalline beings in terror. "You're right," James admitted, his heart sinking. "They wouldn't believe me. They'd think you were the threat." He looked down at the crystal in his hands, its surface now glowing with a soft inner light. "But we can't just do nothing. There has to be a way." A new sound cut through the night. Security drones on patrol. James quickly tucked the crystal away as Prism melted back into the forest. But before the creature vanished completely, it shared one final image, a map of sorts, showing tunnels deep beneath the colony, remnants of the initial mining operations that had been abandoned years ago. James nodded in understanding. They needed a safe place to work, to plan, to figure out how to save both their peoples. As he hurried back to his room, his mind raced with possibilities. He was 15, just a kid by colony standards, but he was also possibly the only human who knew about a threat that could destroy everything and everyone he loved. The next morning, as James sat through his virtual classes, he began formulating a plan. He'd need supplies, access codes, and most importantly, allies. His best friend, Bravery, worked in the colony's maintenance division. He might be able to help secure access to the abandoned tunnels. And his mother's research assistant, Kira, had been like an older sister to him. She might believe him if he showed her proof. But time was running out. Even as he planned, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something was approaching that could end all life on Nova Proxima. James looked out his classroom window at the crystal forest where Prism waited and made a silent promise. He would find a way to help, to bridge the gap between their species, and somehow to save them all. The crystal in his pocket pulsed warmly, as if acknowledging his determination. The real question wasn't whether he would try. It was whether he could succeed before it was too late for everyone. The abandoned mining tunnels echoed with James's footsteps as he carefully made his way through the darkness, his portable light casting strange shadows on the crystalline walls. 2 weeks had passed since he'd discovered the truth about the approaching threat, and he'd spent every spare moment preparing this underground sanctuary. "How's it looking down there?" Ravi's voice crackled through his communicator. His friend was keeping watch topside, monitoring the colony's security feeds from his maintenance terminal. "Better than I expected," James replied, sweeping his light across the cavern he'd chosen as their base. "The structural integrity is solid, and the crystal formations actually amplify our comm signals." Getting Ravi involved had been a calculated risk, but one that paid off. His friend's initial skepticism had vanished the moment he'd met Prism. Still can't believe you made first contact with an advanced alien species, and your first instinct was to play doctor. Ravi had joked. A familiar crystalline chime echoed through the tunnels, and James smiled as Prism emerged from a side passage. The Serpentine being had discovered an entire network of natural crystal tunnels that connected to the mining system. Passages too small for humans, but perfect for its kind. Found something interesting? James asked, noting the excited pattern of lights flowing beneath Prism's surface. The creature's response came as a series of mental images, more crystals, similar to the one James had removed, hidden deep within the tunnel network. A backup system, James murmured, understanding dawning. Your people left more warning beacons here. He pulled out the original crystal, which now pulsed in harmony with Prism's own bioluminescence. Can we use them to contact your species? Get help? The answer came in another vision. The crystals were receivers, not transmitters. They could detect and warn of threats, but sending messages across interstellar distances required something more, something that existed in those vast crystal cities James had glimpsed in earlier visions. Hey, James. Ravi's voice interrupted, tension evident in his tone. We might have a problem. Dr. Williams from Xenobiology is asking questions about some unusual energy readings. She's requesting permission to survey the abandoned tunnels. James felt his stomach drop. Dr. Karen Williams was brilliant but ruthlessly dedicated to her research. If she discovered Prism, how long do we have? She's meeting with the council tomorrow morning. If they approve. A new sound cut through their conversation, a low rumble that seemed to come from the very rock itself. Prism's lights flared in alarm, and suddenly James's mind was flooded with urgent images. The crystals were reacting to something. The warning network activating. It's moving faster than we thought, James whispered, horror creeping into his voice. The threat. It's accelerating. Through his connection with Prism, he could sense it. The world-destroying force was somehow drawn to concentrated life signatures, and the colony's power emissions were like a beacon. What do we do? Ravi asked, picking up on his friend's fear. James looked at Prism, whose geometric eyes pulsed with both concern and determination. They needed more time, but they also needed help. Keeping this secret might doom them all. We need to tell Kira, James decided. She has access to the colony's long-range sensors through the Botanical Research Station. And she trusts me. She'll listen before raising the alarm. Prism's lights shifted in what James had learned to recognize as agreement. The creature had grown to trust his judgment about his own kind, just as he had learned to trust Prism's wisdom about threats beyond human understanding. I'll contact her, Ravi offered. She's on duty at the lab right now. If we time it right, we can bring her down here between shift changes. As they formulated their plan, James studied the crystal in his hand. Its glow had intensified, and he could feel it resonating with the other crystals Prism had discovered. They were building to something, a crescendo of warning that humanity needed to hear before it was too late. There's something else, James said suddenly, remembering fragments of visions he'd seen. Prism's people. They didn't just leave these crystals as warnings. They left something else, something that might help us fight back. The crystalline serpent's eyes blazed with confirmation, and new images filled James's mind. A chamber deep within the crystal tunnels, sealed for centuries, waiting for a moment of desperate need. But accessing it would require both species working together, combining human ingenuity with the crystalline being's ancient technology. James checked his chronometer. They had less than 12 hours before Dr. Williams made her proposal to the council. Less than 12 hours to convince Kira, find this hidden chamber, and figure out how to present their discovery to the colony without causing panic. Ravi, get Kira. Tell her. James paused, thinking carefully. Tell her I found something that changes everything we think we know about Nova Proxima. And tell her to bring her analytical kit. She's going to want to document this. As Ravi signed off to make contact with Kira, James turned to Prism. I hope you're ready for more humans to know about you. Because once we open that sealed chamber, there's no going back. The crystalline being's response was simple but profound. A vision of two species standing together against the darkness, proving that fear of the unknown could be overcome by the courage to trust. Kira stood motionless in the underground chamber, her analytical scanner forgotten in her trembling hands as she stared at Prism. The crystalline being's internal lights created dancing patterns on the cave walls, reflecting off the tears in her eyes. "All this time," she whispered, "we thought we were alone out here." She turned to James, her initial shock giving way to focused intensity. "And you're telling me there's something coming? Something that destroys worlds?" "Show her," James said to Prism. The serpentine creature's eyes flared, and Kira gasped as the visions flooded her mind. James watched her face as she saw what he had seen. The approaching darkness, the destroyed worlds, the urgent countdown to disaster. 3 weeks, Kira said when the vision ended. "We have less than 3 weeks now, and you're saying there's a weapon hidden down here. Something that could help us fight back." Ravi's voice crackled through their communicators. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. Dr. Williams just got authorization for her survey. Teams will be down here in less than 24 hours. James looked at the wall of solid crystal before them, covered in geometric patterns that pulsed faintly in response to Prism's presence. "This is it. The sealed chamber is behind here, but opening it requires both human and crystalline technology working together." Kira pulled out a compact holographic projector from her kit, creating a 3-dimensional scan of the wall's patterns. These aren't just decorative. They're mathematical sequences, similar to what we use in our quantum computers, but far more complex. Prism says we need to synchronize the frequency of our power cells with the crystal's natural resonance. James explained, retrieving the warning crystal from his pocket. It hummed with increasing intensity as he approached the wall. A distant rumble shook the tunnels, causing loose crystals to chime like wind chimes in a storm. "That's the 3rd tremor today," Ravi reported. "The colonial geologists are going crazy trying to explain it." "It's not geological," Kira said, her fingers flying over her scanner's interface. "These energy readings, the planet itself is reacting to whatever's approaching, like a living organism responding to a threat." James felt Prism's urgent presence in his mind, sharing new information. The crystals aren't just a warning system, he realized. They're part of the planet's nervous system, Nova Proxima. It's alive, and it knows what's coming. Working quickly, they set up portable power cells around the chamber, connecting them to Kira's scanning equipment. James held the warning crystal while Prism positioned itself beside him, their energies beginning to synchronize. "Ready?" James asked, looking at his companions, human and alien alike. At their affirmation, he pressed the crystal against the wall's central pattern. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Energy coursed through the geometric designs, making them blaze with light. The crystal in James's hand grew hot, its pulsing synchronizing with Prism's bioluminescence and the power cell's output. With a sound like breaking glass, multiplied 1,000-fold, the wall began to dissolve, revealing a chamber that defied human understanding. Crystalline structures rose from floor to ceiling, each one containing what appeared to be living light. At the center stood a pillar of pure energy, suspended in a matrix of transparent crystals. "It's beautiful," Kira breathed, her scanner forgotten as she stared in wonder. Prism slithered forward, its body resonating with the chamber's energy. Through their mental connection, James understood. This was a weapon, yes, but not one of destruction. It was a tool of transformation, designed to change the very nature of space itself. "The approaching entity feeds on normal spacetime," James explained as the knowledge filtered through their connection. "This device can create a pocket of altered space, a bubble where its feeding process won't work. But to power it," he trailed off as he realized the cost. "What?" Kira asked, noting his expression. "What's wrong?" "It needs both types of energy to work, human technology and crystalline biology. working in perfect harmony. We have to convince the entire colony to cooperate, to link our power grid with Prism's people's technology. And we'd have to do it before. A massive tremor cut him off, stronger than any before. Ravi's voice came through filled with static. James, they're picking up something on the long-range sensors. Something big, and it's moving fast. Through his connection with Prism, James saw it. A void in space, darker than the darkness between stars, heading straight for Nova Proxima. They were out of time. Kira, James said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. You need to get to the council. Show them your scans. Tell them everything. Ravi, download all the sensor data you can. We need proof, undeniable evidence. What about you? Kira asked, already heading for the tunnel exit. James looked at Prism, seeing his own determination reflected in those geometric eyes. We're going to start powering up this device. Because when that thing gets here, we need to be ready. All of us, human and crystalline, together. As Kira and Ravi rushed to their tasks, James placed his hand on the central pillar, feeling its ancient power thrumming through him. Prism coiled beside him, adding its energy to the mix. Around them, the chamber began to wake up, millennia of dormant technology coming to life. They had one chance to save their world, one chance to prove that different species could overcome their fears and work together, one chance to face the darkness with light. The colony's main council chamber erupted in chaos as Kira's holographic presentation ended. The evidence was undeniable. Sensor readings, crystal analysis, and footage of Prism that left no doubt about the reality of both the alien presence and the approaching threat. This is unprecedented, Council Leader Rice declared, her voice cutting through the panic. A 15-year-old boy made first contact with an advanced species, and you're telling me our only hope of survival is to merge our technology with theirs. James stood before them, Prism at his side. The crystalline being's presence had initially caused security to draw weapons, but the creature's peaceful demeanor and the urgency of the situation had forced them to listen. Look at the long-range scans, Ravi insisted from his station at the colony's main sensor array. The void is accelerating. At current speed, it'll reach us in less than 72 hours. The chamber's massive display showed the approaching anomaly, a perfect sphere of nothingness that devoured light itself. Behind it lay a trail of dead systems, each one stripped of all energy and life. The device in the crystal chamber, James explained, it's not just a weapon. It's a key to understanding what we can be together. Prism's people left it here because they knew someday we'd need to unite. Through their mental connection, Prism shared images of past civilizations that had faced similar threats. Some had survived by working together, while others had fallen to fear and division. The crystalline being's internal lights pulsed with urgency, and James translated the patterns into words. The void isn't natural, he continued. It's ancient technology gone wrong, designed to harvest energy, but now consuming everything in its path. The only way to stop it is to create a space it can't feed on, a harmony of different energy types it can't process. Dr. Williams stepped forward, her initial skepticism replaced by scientific fascination. The crystalline biology of Prism species operates on quantum principles we barely understand. If we could synchronize our power grid with their energy patterns, we'd have hours, at most, to reconfigure our entire power distribution system, Chief Engineer Torres interrupted. And one mistake could destroy both the colony and our crystalline allies. The room fell silent as Council Leader Rice studied the sensor displays. The void's approach was visible now even to the naked eye. A growing darkness in Nova Proxima's violet sky. Show them, James whispered to Prism. The crystalline being's eyes flared, and suddenly every person in the chamber gasped as their minds were filled with visions, not of destruction this time, but of possibility. They saw their colony transformed, human technology and crystalline biology, working in perfect synthesis, creating something entirely new. We've spent years studying this planet's crystals, Kira added, but we never realized they were part of a living system. If we join with them, we won't just survive. We'll evolve, become something greater than either species alone. Council Leader Reyes stood, her decision written on her face. Begin the evacuation of non-essential personnel to the underground chambers. Engineer Torres, coordinate with Dr. Williams and Kira to integrate our power systems. And James, she paused, looking at the young man who had bridged two worlds. You and Prism need to show us exactly how this device works. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. The colony's power core was carefully transported to the crystal chamber, its plasma containment fields modified to resonate with the crystalline frequencies. More of Prism's kind emerged from the crystal forests, their combined bioenergy strengthening the growing network. James worked tirelessly alongside both species, his unique connection with Prism helping to translate between radically different ways of thinking. The colony's fear gradually transformed into wonder as they witnessed the crystalline being's intelligence and grace. Finally, with less than an hour remaining before the Void's arrival, everything was ready. The chamber hummed with combined power, human technology pulsing in harmony with crystalline energy. Through the neural network that now connected everyone in the colony, they could feel the device's potential building. It's time, James said, standing with Prism before the central pillar. Around them, humans and crystalline beings gathered in concentric circles, each adding their energy to the growing field. The Void appeared in the sky above Nova Proxima, its absolute darkness beginning to pull at the planet's atmosphere. But in the chamber below, something beautiful was happening. As James placed his hand on the crystal pillar, Prism's energy merged with his own. The device activated, sending a pulse of combined human and crystalline power upward through the planet's crystal networks. The energy field expanded, creating a bubble of transformed spacetime that encompassed the entire colony. The Void struck this field, and for the first time in its ancient existence, could not feed. The harmonized energy was incompatible with its consumption process. As they watched through the colony's sensors, the Void began to break apart, its artificial nature unable to adapt to this new form of reality. In the aftermath, as Nova Proxima's violet sun rose over a changed world, James stood with Prism at the colony's observation deck. Below them, humans and crystalline beings worked together to maintain their new combined systems. The crystal forests pulsed with renewed life, and the colony's structures had begun to integrate living crystal into their design. We did it, James said, both to Prism and to himself. The crystalline being's response came not just in images now, but in clear thoughts that everyone connected to the network could understand. This is only the beginning. Council Leader Reyes joined them, watching the sunrise. The other colonies need to know about this, she said, about what we can achieve when we overcome our fears and work together. James smiled, feeling the combined hopes and dreams of two species flowing through the crystal network. On Nova Proxima, humanity had not just survived, they had transformed, taking the first steps toward a future where the boundaries between species faded in the light of shared purpose and understanding. The crystalline forests shimmered in the morning light, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other beings would soon learn of what had happened here, of how a 15-year-old boy's courage to trust the unknown had changed the destiny of two worlds. The end.